Hi everyone, this is a summary of chapters 7, 8, and 9 of the Tao Te Ching, and the version on the screen here is the translation by Paul Lin and the commentary, the notes below, by Wang Bi. I will give you a link in the description down below. So let's start with chapter 7. Heaven lasts, earth endures. They last and endure because they do not live for themselves, and thus can live forever. Just want to point out that in Stephen Mitchell's version, right here, he translates the first line, turn to it really quick, lost my place, as the Tao is infinite and eternal. So we're talking about heaven and earth. We're also talking about the Tao here. And so I interpret that as Lao Tzu is talking about the way of nature. And he says the way of nature is enduring and selfless, or not living for itself. It is living for others, or present for others, and it is eternal. In the next line, he says, therefore, the sage positions himself behind and yet stays ahead. He denies himself and so is preserved. Is it not because of his selflessness that he completes his own? And this connection here between the first stanza and the second, the word is therefore. So what I take it to be happening here is that the first stanza is about the Tao, or metaphysics, and the second stanza is about ethics, or Lao Tzu's philosophy of leadership. So the ethics here is based on this view of nature in the first stanza. He says, therefore the sage positions himself behind and yet stays ahead. He denies himself. So here we have a wise person, or the master, or a political leader, who remains humble and selfless and is focused on others. And in the Brian Walker translation, which is right here, Brian Walker says, he translates the last line as abandons himself and is thereby fulfilled. So the picture you have here is of absolute altruism or selflessness. In chapter 8, Lao Tzu gives us an analogy of water. And so he says, the man of supreme goodness resembles water. Water benefits all things without competing with them, staying in places that men despise. Therefore, it is very close to Tao. So we'll stop there for a moment and look at that first line. So water here is beneficial, it's life-giving. In the third line, it's non-competitive, it's passive. It fills in low places. He says in the fourth line, staying in places that men despise. That footnote indicates that the word here refers to low places. So it's very flexible, it's passive, it's also humble, right? So the low places being humble places. And this is like the Tao. So he continues, dwelling in good places, having a heart that loves the profound, allying with benevolence, inviting trust with words, being righteous in governing, managing all things well, moving at the right time, just because he does not compete, the man of supreme goodness frees himself of blame. And so in Brian Walker's version, in the last line, Brian Walker says, if you compete with no one can compete with you. So again, you have this picture of a sage or a wise person who is non-competitive, who is non-striving, and is like water. And that's a good thing, right? In chapter 9, Lao Tzu says, hold a cup and fill it to the brim. Is it not better to stop in time? In other words, if you fill a cup to the top, it's going to spill. He continues, hammer and sharpen an edge, it cannot last long. The image I have in my mind is sharpening a knife. If you sharpen it too much, you'll break it. He says, fill a hall with gold and jade, they cannot be protected. In other words, if you're too greedy or you pursue wealth too much, then you're going to lose it. And then in the second stanza he says, he who is rich, honored, and arrogant brings blame upon himself, and he who withdraws after achieving success and performing duty adheres to the Tao of heaven. So let's look at these two sentences closely. He who is rich, honored or famous, and arrogant or proud brings blame upon himself. So this clearly these aren't good things, but what does he mean by blame here? In the Walker version, the word instead of blame is disaster, brings disaster upon himself. And in the Ames Hall version, which I have right here, the word used is calamity. And that, in conjunction with this footnote number 4 down below, makes me think that what he's talking about here is simply the consequences. If you pursue riches, fame, and if you're proud, you're going to meet some bad consequences. Disaster is going to come, just like in the Bible it says pride comes before a fall. This isn't to necessarily give moral blame upon these people, saying you're morally wrong to be rich or honored or arrogant. Maybe Lao Tzu would say that too, but in this verse here, this statement is more about consequences, tragedy again, and disaster or calamity. So be careful. It sounds like that's what he's saying. He then says, he who withdraws after achieving success and performing duty adheres to the Tao of heaven. In the Brian Walker version, it says, this is the way of heaven, do your work, then quietly step back. And in this footnote here, Wang Bi says in number 5, the 4 seasons evolve in turn, each completing its role and then moving on. So in other words, we all have a responsibility, we all have a duty. We need to do that, but then don't go too far with it, right? Know our place, do what we're supposed to do, and then step back. I hope you found that helpful.